got loyalty, got royalty inside my DNA.
Welcome into the Sacramento Kings podcast presented by Hoop Ball and hoop-ball.com. Actually, wait a minute, man. Hold on. Let's go ahead and get this Kendrick Lamar out of here. Since this is the Sacramento Kings podcast, let's go ahead and drop this intro on him.
Yeah. Drink. Look, riddle me this. How many records I need to put out so you know I can spit? Ain't popping no pills, you do as you wish. Like Cole say, take a look at my wrist. Ain't got it on me, but I keep it on me when I go to events. And I got some homies that move in silence when the one around them, so you know they legit. I'm in the cut, ayy. I know some homies that's ready to go every time that we gotta pull up. Ayy, she tell me she feeling me, I am not with it, she ended up getting the stuff. Ayy, I put $1 million away in the bag, all the cases was starting to get rough. Ayy, but it ain't never get rough. Ayy, look, I'm an edit for hooping and rapping and static. I'm rapping in front of this camera, ain't no comparison. Now they see me on the screen and I'm spitting out heat like a Canada. Shout out to Nick, give me your wildin' out. Try and have some fun, yeah, that's all I'm about. But you better watch your mouth, cause I'll put some words together and clean it, rapper out. Now I'm yelling dreams till the day I die. I got the squad with me, they gon' ride. They keep on asking me how do I do it, and I never tell them I keep it inside. I feel like a student, I've been on the road. City to city, I'm putting on shows. I'm writing a verse on the plane, I'm going insane. That's something you already know. Look, I ain't never been patient. I know I was up, I ain't wanna hit nothing else. And they try to tell me I wouldn't make it. Oh well, I was rolling with the cards that I had dealt. Now I'm cooking up good like a good chef. Yo, Ma, why you always gotta go left? Cause if I change up, wouldn't be myself. And plus, why change something you ain't stopped yet?
Oh, MB35 can go, man. Marvin Bagley III. Thought we dropped that today. He put it on Twitter. His new album comes out on the 24th, August 24th. That's on Saturday, man. Congratulations to him. I'm looking forward to it. I went back on YouTube and listened to some of the tracks that he's done. My only concern, man, is when I listen to hip hop, I like guys that are versatile, that can change their sound. Like Kendrick Lamar. If you follow me on Instagram, you know Kendrick Lamar is my favorite rapper. And he has an ability, like he has different tones. He has like different personalities when he raps. And I think that's one of the cool things about Dame Lillard when he raps is he can create different sounds, which create different personalities. J. Cole does the same thing. Lil Wayne does the same thing. There are a lot of guys who just, you know, their different sounds are kind of different personalities. And it helps, you know, when you're listening through the course of a 10, 12, 15 song album because it doesn't get repetitive. It doesn't sound like the same thing over and over again. And that's one of the biggest problems in hip hop today is everything sounds the same. Like it's like you're listening to the same thing over and over and over again. You're listening to the same sound over and over and over again. So I'm looking forward to hearing what Marvin Bagley III drops on the 24th to get an idea of, because I've heard some of his mixtapes, you know, of his mixtapes that are available on YouTube, heard the freestyles that he did in the little Dame Lillard versus Marvin Bagley thing, but I want to get a better feel for what he is in this polished up album, man. So I'm looking forward to that, and congratulations to Marvin Bagley III for the release of the album as well. And thank you so much for tuning in, man. Had to hit that little intro here for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Sacramento Kings podcast presented by Hoop Ball and hoop-ball.com. Make sure you check them out for all of your basketball news, and make sure you check them out, the whole Hoop Ball Podcast Network. If you're a Clippers fan or you want to get some insight on the Clippers, the Nets, the Lakers, they've got podcasts all over the NBA. And if you're a big fantasy basketball fan, make sure you check out their fantasy podcasts that they post all throughout the week as well. Greatly appreciate everybody tuning in, and has made the start of the show a monster success. Make sure you tell all your friends about it as the season is just about 2 months away. Make sure you subscribe, and if you wouldn't mind, rate and review, particularly there on Apple Podcasts. Those ratings and those reviews go a very, very long way in helping get this podcast noticed all around the sports world. So thank you so much for checking us out, man. I can't believe we're about to do this. I can't believe this is what I'm leading with. There's a number of things we got to talk about today, including a little bit of love from the national media. As a matter of fact, the two main stories today have to do with the national media, and one of these I'm absolutely stunned by. It was on The Jump yesterday, and I've played this clip like over and over and over again, at least 3 or 4 times, trying to figure out how I can edit and cut it down without it losing its context. And I figured out there's no way that I can't. So I'm going to bring you into this conversation that Brian Windhurst, Tim McMahon, and Royce Young had on The Jump. This was yesterday. So I'm going to play this for you, and we're not going to take it out of context. We're going to present it to you exactly as it was presented on national television. And okay, I'll save my thoughts for after you hear it. You can form your opinions. You can shoot us a text message when you're listening to this as well, 916-888-5898. Again, courtesy of ESPN. This is The Jump yesterday, talking about De'Aaron Fox.
Let's move on to De'Aaron Fox, who is apparently happy in Sacramento. He told 137pm.com, that's right, that he loves Sacramento, is not looking to play in a big market. Here's the quote. I don't crave to be in a big market. After last season, there was a buzz in Sacramento. Everyone in Sacramento is a Kings fan. If we start making the playoffs or we become a championship contender, the entire city is going to go nuts. That's the difference between being in a big market and a small one. I appreciate his sentiments. I don't know if everybody in Sacramento is a Kings fan. I think the Lakers get some cheers when they go there. But do you buy what Fox is selling here, Tim?
Well, look, does he want to stay in Sacramento long term if they take steps and they become a perennial playoff team? Sure, that makes sense. And I do think, though, there is something to being the only show in town. Arco Arena used to be an absolute madhouse when the Kings were a perennial playoff team and a legitimate contender. And I think you see the crowds in Oklahoma City over the last decade, Utah. I think Portland has some of that vibe. There is a different feel. You know, Dirk Nowitzki once kind of compared it to a college atmosphere when it's that one show in town. Those do tend to be the rowdiest crowds and the best atmospheres.
What year is this for De'Aaron Fox? This is his third year?
Going into his third year.
Yeah. We'll see what he says in year 6, year 7.
Exactly.
I can pull you a list and give you about 25 Kevin Durant quotes that sound almost exactly like that. And I'm not saying that Kevin Durant didn't mean him at the time, and De'Aaron Fox most likely means exactly what he's saying. But players feel differently when things play out, when they see what happens, whether it's with the coaching staff, teammates of theirs, things that are occurring around the league. They become friends with somebody else in the league. And the way that they feel now is not necessarily the way that they feel in the future. And that shouldn't be held against them. You know, like I said, you can look at Kevin Durant quotes where he says the same sort of things about Oklahoma City. And that shouldn't be necessarily held against him because people change, their motivations change, circumstances
he did withdraw from Team USA to focus on the playoffs.
Yeah.
We'll believe that.
And the Kings being a perennial playoff team is a pretty big if, considering they do have the longest postseason drought in the league. A nice young core, but not necessarily the most stable franchise.
Some players mean it, though. Damian Lillard has said it, he has stood by it, and he has doubled down on it with Portland.
All right, let me say a couple things about this. Number one, before I even say it, I think I really like De'Aaron Fox as a person, and I like his game, and I like his attitude. Mm-hmm. One, this is the time where you want to pledge your allegiance to your team because they control you. And not only that, he's a year away from a contract extension. And if I were him, I'd be thinking about being a max player.
Absolutely.
So you want to tell the whole fan base
Smart
and your
business.
team that you're included. I'm not saying that that's what he's doing here, but it's smart business. The second thing I will say is talking to some Kings players last year, they have this nice little core of young guys. Bogdan Bogdanovic, De'Aaron Fox, Buddy Hield, Marvin Bagley. They really believe that group is going to come together and change the future of the Kings. And I think that one of the things that they want to do is they want to devote themselves together and they want to sort of grow as a group. So I do believe that there is some sincerity in what he's saying, but it's interesting to point out.
So there it is. There's the clip from The Jump with Brian Windhurst, Tim McMahon, and Royce Young in its entirety. Royce Young was pointing out Kevin Durant because he covered Durant when he was in Oklahoma City. There's so much to take away from this. First, the amount of shade that Brian Windhurst throws at Sacramento and at De'Aaron Fox, all before his nice little fluffy, I kind of believe what they might be doing with their core and all of that stuff, that little piece you heard there at the end, is pretty extraordinary. Because you go back and you talk about he's happy in Sacramento, almost like he can't believe that would be the case.
No, he told one.
Take a listen
let's
to him
move on
here.
to De'Aaron Fox, who is apparently happy in Sacramento.
Like he's stunned. Like I'm shocked that De'Aaron Fox is happy in Sacramento. He goes on to talk about Laker fans being at the Golden One Center, and then you can't, obviously you can't see this because you're listening to the podcast, but he drops the air quotes when he talks about focusing on the playoffs. Now that I get because, we outlined this last time. I don't really know that making the playoffs is the reason that De'Aaron Fox withdrew from USA Basketball, and I still maintain it doesn't matter. We'll talk about USA Basketball here in a heartbeat, but the one takeaway, or I should say the biggest takeaway that I have from this conversation regarding De'Aaron Fox on August 21st, 2019 is, we're doing this already? How good is De'Aaron Fox that we've already heard Max Kellerman try to shift them off to the Lakers on an appearance on First Take? We've already heard The Jump do an entire segment questioning, like, why would De'Aaron Fox say he loves Sacramento? He's a year away. He's going to be a Sacramento King for the foreseeable future, for at least 5 more years. And he is, or probably, 4 to 5 more years. He's a year away, and they said this. He's a year away from almost certainly becoming a max player. And we're already trying to shuffle him out of here. And by we, I mean them. This is the second time that ESPN, or at least the second time that I can remember that ESPN has tried to shuffle De'Aaron Fox off of the Sacramento Kings. And that tells you how good he is. If nothing else, that tells you how good. You could talk about how it disrespects the Sacramento Kings franchise, how it disrespects the young core, and all of that. We'll talk about that in a second. But if nothing else, it tells you how good De'Aaron Fox is, that you have a segment on the Daily Basketball Show talking about, man, why would De'Aaron say he likes it in Sacramento? I don't get it. This is baffling. This is confusing. Why would De'Aaron like it in Sacramento? Better yet, why would anybody like it in Sacramento? And he talks about the vibe. He talks about the buzz in Sacramento last year. And if we become a championship contender, the entire city is going to go nuts. Man, he's right. He's 100% right, because there are people who are listening to this podcast right now. There are people that are Kings fans that have no idea what it's like for the Kings to make the playoffs. They have no idea what that. They hear people bitching and complaining about 2001 and Game 6 and all of that, and the Chris Webber injury, and then rushing him back mid-season and throwing off the chemistry. There are people listening to this podcast that they've heard about it, but they didn't live through it. They didn't live through everybody, rocking the purple on game days in the playoffs, and the cowbells and the cowtowns and that whole deal. Like, they weren't around for that. And with where the arena is positioned now and just the overall growth of downtown Sacramento, oh yeah. Yeah, De'Aaron's right, man. The whole city's going to go crazy. It's going to go absolutely nuts. But they got to get there first. And how far away they are from making the playoffs, how far they are away from being a championship contender, well, that remains to be seen. After Brian Windhurst threw about 47 shades over the Sacramento Kings in that jump segment, he did talk about Bogey and MB3 and De'Aaron and Harry Giles and the young group of guys that they got here that I think a lot of the league actually believes in. Which ties into something that ESPN.com posted over the last couple of days as well, talking about the most underrated teams. They talked about teams that are overrated and underrated all throughout the NBA. They broke it down by conferences, and there were some people. It's funny. Brooklyn made an appearance on the overrated list and the underrated list. But when it came to the Western Conference and they were talking about most underrated teams, Bobby Marks, front office insider, he thought the Kings were extremely underrated. This is a quote from Bobby Marks here. The team that won 39 games a season ago is penalized by a deep Western Conference. The Kings bolstered their depth with free agent signings of Corey Joseph, Trevor Ariza, and Dwayne Dedmon. Returned their starting 5 and are still projected to drop 2 games in the win column for 2019-20. If the Kings can get an all-star type season from De'Aaron Fox, the same consistency from Buddy Hield, and continued development by Marvin Bagley III, they should win 45 to 46 games and compete for one of the final playoff spots this season. Jorge Sedano also chimed in. Most underrated team in the Western Conference, it's Sacramento. I thought hard about Oklahoma City at 33 wins, but decided on the Kings. While I don't expect them to make the playoffs, I do believe that they'll improve upon last season's win total, even after a big jump last season. Fox is arguably the best young point guard in the NBA, and new coach Luke Walton wants the Kings to play a fast-paced style that fits their personnel perfectly. So there's a couple of national media writers, front office insiders, television personalities chiming in on what they think about the Sacramento Kings this upcoming season. I want to go back to, I'm going to try to get Aaron Brewski on the podcast for next week, the first podcast that we drop next Tuesday. I'm going to see if I can get Brewski on. But if you go back to the first conversation we had when we launched this podcast back in episode number 1, he was talking about the wild card and how Luke Walton is kind of the wild card and how trying to figure out what Luke Walton is going to do with this personnel, because on the surface, you just look like, go, well, you don't change much, right? You have a style, you have a technique that works. You have to improve defensively. And probably most importantly, and everyone who sat through particularly the last quarter of the season last year will tell you, these guys got to figure out how to close games. It looked like they were closing games at a rate that we had never seen them before in the first half of the season when we saw Bogey hit buzzer beaters. We saw De'Aaron do the same thing. We saw this team win close games. But then suddenly we saw them lose 19-point leads to Phoenix. We saw that just incredible performance from D'Angelo Russell and the Brooklyn Nets, and that horrifying performance from the Sacramento Kings where they blew a 28-point lead. And we had some sort of company event the next day. I don't recall what it was at all, but it was some sort of event where we had to be at, and it involved the Sacramento Kings. And we were around the coaches following that loss to Brooklyn and listening to them talk about how their night went, and Coach Gates, doing film sessions with different clients, showing them how they watch film, and looking back, like, everyone was like, what happened last night? I was up till 4 a.m. watching the film, trying to figure it out, and he lays it all out, and we all remember that there were just points in the final quarter of the season where it felt like the Kings couldn't close, even the final game of the regular season, which I wonder how much that game played into projections, whether it's ESPN projections or it's Las Vegas projections or it's just overall projections. I wonder how much that final game against Portland played into, people thinking that the Kings were going to win 37 games, or, we've seen as low as 35, basically falling off of what they did last year, saying that the growth that they made last year wasn't even real, saying many of the games that they won were probably just lucky. And I wonder how many people look back at that game against Portland and go, yeah, that's kind of a microcosm of the season. They looked really good for a portion of it. Then they blew the lead and they went on to lose. And they were, I can never remember the number, but I know it's something horrifying. Like, they were outscored 77 to 40 something as that game tailed off. And it's just, okay. You've got all of these people. Remember, things aren't as wonderful as the last time you saw them, and they're not as bad as the last time you saw them either. But that last memory is the one that's the greatest in your mind. And that could be the case with people who looked at the Sacramento Kings. That last performance against Portland, that's indicative of what the Kings were. We saw them do it against Phoenix. We saw them do it against Portland. We saw them do it against teams time after time after time. This team is not ready. And they were right, by the way. The team isn't ready. That team last year wasn't ready. The question is this team this year ready? With the additions of Corey Joseph and Trevor Ariza and Dwayne Dedmon. And here's the only thing, one of my biggest concerns in watching Team USA beat Australia in that scrimmage on Wednesday night. I can't lie. Like, I don't said this last podcast. Whatever De'Aaron wants to do, whatever Marvin Bagley wants to do, those two are professionals. They've got an 82-game season coming up ahead of them. They're striving to make the playoffs. It's the longest drought in the NBA right now of not making the playoffs. And hey, if they want to step away and they want to mentally as much as physically prepare for that, dude, I totally get it. But watching that scrimmage against Australia, I kept looking at it like, man, I really wish De'Aaron was out there. Because I looked at what Kemba Walker did, and I was just thinking, man, that backcourt's Kemba and De'Aaron Fox, like, sign me up for that just as a De'Aaron Fox fan, because I know how good De'Aaron is. Now you're getting some extra run with the likes of Kemba Walker, who I think is one of the best guards in the league, and then, of course, Greg Popovich and that entire coaching staff, and then the rest of the roster. I hate that the Sacramento Kings contingent isn't there. I'm happy Harrison Barnes is there, but I think of the three that were there in Las Vegas, the one who has the least to gain is Harrison Barnes, because he's done this before. He's been around USA basketball. He's like a USA basketball lifer. He's been around them forever. Like, this This experience isn't new to him. But it was new for De'Aaron. And it was new for Marvin Bagley. And I'm sure they've been on, U17, U18, USA basketball teams and all that. But this is a different level. Now we're talking about the NBA. This is your chance to be a part of it as a member of the National Basketball Association. And this is your chance, probably, hopefully, your only chance to play under Greg Popovich and to play under Steve Kerr and to be around that many different basketball minds for that stretch of time. Where really, that's all you've got. You've got those USA basketball guys for the next, 20 some odd days at this point. So when he first withdrew, it was like, I don't really care. Like, whatever. But watching those guys play last night, particularly watching how good Kemba Walker was, it was like, man, I really wish De'Aaron was there. I think he could have gotten a lot out of it. And again, it's cool that he chose not to. It's fine. Same thing with Bagley. But I still hate we're focused on making the playoffs. I think that's so cheesy. But I would really have loved to see De'Aaron Fox, because that dude is the future. When you in a couple of years where you're talking about the best point guards in the league, I think you're going to be talking about De'Aaron Fox. His name is going to be mentioned, right at the top. Maybe not even when you're isolating it to point guards. Maybe when you're just talking about guards, period. That actually brings me to something else. I was looking at, I came across something on one of the SB Nation websites. I think it was the Utah Jazz one. And it was talking about the best backcourts, the best starting backcourts in the NBA. And I was floored because it was the top 10, right? And I thought, okay, I like this. Let's see where they put De'Aaron and Buddy. Yo, they put those two as an honorable mention. Like, they didn't even crack the top 10. Let me give you the top 10 here real quick. Ricky Rubio and Devin Booker is number 10. Devin Booker is the most overrated player in the NBA. No one gets a pass like Devin Booker does. Like, he had the trashiest, 70-point game in history. Just absolute garbage. He's a scorer. Okay, fine. He's on Phoenix. Okay, fine. So we're supposed to say, oh, we've got to get Devin Booker out of Phoenix because Phoenix is just ruining him. Oh, it's like what they were trying to do with De'Aaron Fox on the jump. Like, we've got to get De'Aaron. He's so good. We've got to get him out of Sacramento. Sacramento's going to ruin him. Yo, man, Devin Booker's overrated. And I think that video of him calling for no double teams is funny. I don't really have a take on it. I don't care. I don't know what the etiquette is for professional basketball players playing pickup. I didn't know before that video came out that you're not allowed to double team in open gym. But I just look at Devin Booker like, man, this dude is so overrated. Can anybody listening to this say definitively, without a question mark, that Devin Booker is really, really good? Can anyone say that? Because he's talked about as if he's great. It's like, yo, he's a scorer on a team with absolutely zero scores. That's not his fault. But are we sure he's not Kevin Martin? Like, are we sure he's not a scorer on a bad team? I get so tired when I hear about the young talent in the NBA that Devin Booker's name is always like right near the top. And hey, I get it, dude. These guys are basketball minds. I'm not. I'm a fan, man. I'm a media guy. I talk for a living. I just don't see it. Or at least I haven't yet. Jamal Murray and Gary Harris make the list at number 9. Ben Simmons and Josh Richardson, Malcolm Brogdon and Victor Oladipo. None of these backcourts have actually played together yet. Oh, here's another one that hasn't played together yet. Kemba Walker and Jaylen Brown. Okay, then. Kyrie Irving and Karis LeVert. Again, not a single backcourt has played together. Steph Curry and D'Angelo Russell. Not a single backcourt. Mike Conley and Donovan Mitchell. These guys have yet to play a single game together. James Harden and Russell Westbrook. They haven't played together in years. And then at number 1, the one duo on this entire list that has played together, Dame Lillard and CJ McCollum. Buddy and De'Aaron is nice. Like, I don't know. I could say that with a completely impartial view. Like, those two together are nice. And that's one of the nicest backcourts in the NBA. I understand, when you start looking at teams like, Portland and Denver, obviously Golden State, that's going to be, subbed out. It's going to be Steph Curry and Klay Thompson as the season rolls along here. But as I was, I looked at that and I'm reading this article like, okay, wait, is this the top 10 for backcourts that haven't played together? And then I saw number 1 and I saw De'Aaron and Buddy as an honorable mention and thought, oh, okay, this doesn't make any sense at all. But that's the beauty of being a fan, right? That's the beauty of having a blog. That's the beauty of having a podcast, is you get to spread your opinions. And if I was going to rate backcourts, I don't think the Sacramento Kings backcourt would be an honorable mention. And I don't think there would be too many names in front of them. I don't think there'd be too many backcourts in front of them. I'm intrigued by a lot of these. I'm intrigued about Malcolm Brogdon and Victor Oladipo, but I haven't seen them play together yet. I love Kemba Walker and Jaylen Brown, but I haven't seen them play together yet. Kyrie Irving and Karis LeVert. I'm intrigued with anybody who could play with Kyrie Irving. Steph Curry and D'Angelo Russell. Yep. Curious. I'm legit curious. I think Mike Conley is a great addition with Donovan Mitchell in Utah. James Harden and Russell Westbrook. We haven't seen them play together in years. I'm a huge fan of Russell Westbrook. And then Dame and CJ, it's proven the success is there. But an honorable mention for Buddy and De'Aaron, those are two guys who might be max players in a little over a year. Going to have a max backcourt. I like what Bobby Marks said, by the way, talking about if you get an all-star type season from De'Aaron Fox and the same consistency from Buddy Hield, because that's what I was hoping for. I can't imagine Buddy Hield making another jump like he did last year. If he is that player, the Sacramento Kings are in great shape. The one thing that I worry about, and I started to allude to this a little bit ago when I first read Bobby Marks' quote, the one thing that I worry about is De'Aaron Fox took such a big jump from year 1 to year 2. I get concerned that people expect the same thing from Marvin Bagley. I think what De'Aaron did wasn't normal. That was an abnormal jump. He improved in every facet of the game. He was more aggressive. He had a year under his belt. He was clearly the leader of that team. He was significantly better defensively. He did everything better. And man, could Bagley do that? Because I feel like that's an unfair barometer to set. If Marvin Bagley improves in his sophomore campaign, dude, that's great. That's a win. But thinking he's going to make a jump similar to what De'Aaron Fox did, I think is a bit crazy. I think if he makes any sort of a jump, it's a win. Same with Harry Giles. Harry Giles makes any sort of jump, it's a win for the Sacramento Kings. But it starts with De'Aaron and the type of season that you want him to have. And then, you get that consistency from Buddy Hield, man. I think the Sacramento Kings are in great shape in this coming season. I agree with Bobby Marks. I don't have a win total. I don't know how to do that. I think when you try to predict win totals, it always gets a little dicey. You can never really lay that out very well. But mid-40s? Okay. I also think that Oklahoma City is underrated. Has them at 33 wins. I could see them a little bit higher than that. I think they're going to be better than teams expect them to be. But it's someone used this line when one of those two guys used the line when talking about the Sacramento Kings. It was Sedano. The Western Conference is just brutal. They're almost a victim of the Western Conference. But it'll be fun, man, and we're just a couple of months away. Appreciate you tuning in here to the Sacramento Kings podcast presented by Hoopball and hoop-ball.com. Make sure you check them out for all of your basketball needs. If you're new to the show, hope you dug what you were listening to. I'm Damien Barling. You can find me on all social media platforms at Damien Barling. That's Twitter and Instagram. You can search Damien Barling on Facebook. Hit the like button there as well. I also host a daily sports talk show that is available on this very same podcast platform that you're listening to this Sacramento Kings podcast. Just search Damien Barling, the creatively titled The Podcast with Damien Barling. Hit the subscribe button there. Rate and review both shows, particularly if you're on Apple Podcasts. That's super important. Tell all your friends about what we're doing here on the Hoop Ball Podcast Network. Tell all your Sacramento Kings fans what we got going on here, and we're going to have a lot of fun leading in to the regular season again, just a couple of months away here. You got any thoughts on the show? Send them my way, damienbarling@me.com, or hit our 24/7 text line at 916-888-5898.